Hey everyone, it's Jenny. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties about our chat room. I don't know why. Super disturbing, but I'm not going to let that stop us. So I'm just making sure that everybody can hear me, and we're going to try to get this going. Although now I'm hearing some talk that you can't even see this, but it's telling me that it's live. So that is really, really disturbing. I am going to carry on and do the webinar, and we're going to record it, and we will be able to, so it looks like you can't even hear me. Let me just double check that. I'm so sorry about that. We're going to fix this. Don't worry, technical problems can be overcome. And we're going to overcome them. So I don't know really what is going on. This has never happened before, but please bear with me because we're going to make it work. I am still trying to fix this. All right, I am going to just going to go ahead because I am going to guess that some of you can hear me, and that we're just going to go ahead and get this teaching done and this webinar done, and certainly going to get the recording out to all of you. Okay, so starting from scratch, you guys, welcome to the webinar. And what we're going to talk about today is how to write a synopsis. I'm going to kind of go faster than I was going to in the beginning because it sounds like we're having some technical problems and I want to get the teaching done. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. So quickly, to get through this beginning stuff, my name's Jenny Nash. I am an author and I'm a book coach, and I am the Chief Creative Officer of Author Accelerator. I created Author Accelerator to give people a low-cost, affordable, easy way to get book coaching. I found in my own one-on-one coaching that this is absolutely the best way to get your book written, to have one-on-one help, editorial help and weekly editorial help. It gives you accountability, it gives you feedback, it gives you emotional support. It's a fabulous way to proceed, and that's what Author Accelerator is all about. And as part of this webinar, at the end, you can go on to my webpage at jennynash.com/offers. And first of all, you can download the workbook for this webinar. You can download the synopsis samples that we have there. I have a special bonus up there that is drafts of a synopsis in production, which I edited and worked with the writer one-on-one all the way through 5 drafts, and you can see those unfold. So that is all up there at jennynash.com/offers. There's also a special offer to get your synopsis edited and to join Author Accelerator at a discount. So all that is up there for you to grab. So what I'm going to do now is head into the presentation and show you the 5 steps that I have developed to writing a good synopsis. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is, this is me. I introduced myself already and my crazy technology problems today. The first thing you need to know about a synopsis is why you even need one. And the most critical part of a book proposal is the synopsis. So some people ask me, is a synopsis different from a book proposal? And the answer is yes, it absolutely is. A synopsis is part of a book proposal. And a book proposal is basically a business plan that you present to your the agents that you're pitching to in order to try to land a deal with them, to sign with them. And you need a book proposal for every genre. Absolutely, for sure, for nonfiction, it's a critical part of the pitch process. And Also, for fiction, you need a proposal. It's not typical, it's not common, but it is a really powerful and professional way to approach an agent. So I always have my clients do. It's a much shorter document than nonfiction book proposal, but it's still very powerful. We'll talk about all those things a little bit later. And memoir also absolutely needs a book proposal. I err on the side with memoir of doing more rather than less. So the other parts of a book proposal are, I'm not going to go into here today, but I do have a course at Author Accelerator, which you can do as a self-study course or as a course with feedback that walks you through all the elements of a book proposal. And again, a synopsis is just one part of it. And what a synopsis is just a summary of your book. It's an overview of the book. It's the whole thing condensed down. So a synopsis is really key for writing conferences where you're networking with agents and editors. And you're going to want to have that printed out. You're going to want to hand it to people. You're going to want to be able to tell people that you have it. It makes you look really professional. It makes you look really prepared. And it's a powerful way to go into a writing conference. It's also really excellent for enticing the readers on your website. You can have your overview up there and have it, you know, be there for readers to see. And it's also a really great way to, well, as I say, to back into writing your book jacket blurb or Amazon description. If you start with a synopsis, then it's easy to water it down to a shorter book jacket copy. Also, a synopsis just in general is a really great exercise to do to wrap your mind around your story or your argument and to make it stronger. It's just an excellent tool to have. And I often suggest that writers do it at various stages of the book writing process, just in order to really get a sense of their book and their story, and to make sure that they, like what they're writing, that it's focused, that it's going in the right direction. So the next thing to talk about is why writing a synopsis is so darn hard. It's really hard. In fact, this morning I want to share with you this hilarious and also heartbreaking email that I got from a writer. She said, "I absolutely hate, loathe, and despise writing synopses. I've had partials requested and agent interest based on synopses I've written, but writing them makes me want to cry. It's performance anxiety. I hate having to tell my story. I'd much rather the writing tell the story. I hate being a narrator who's actually there. This is something I really need help with, just finding courage to admit that I'm the storyteller." I just love that. That just so perfectly captures why writing a synopsis is so hard. It's, you know, when you're the author and you're writing and you've got, you know, the words on the page, it's not you. It's not, you know, it's something that you've created. It's a different product. It's something else entirely. But when you step into the realm of selling that book, of wanting someone to buy it, to read it, you become something different. You do become, you know, it's the difference between writing alone in your room and writing something that you want the whole world to see. And, you know, it makes you confront the reality of that, the reality of the marketplace, that books are bought and sold. It's a very different kind of writing. It's sales copy, really. It's marketing copy. And that's very different from writing fiction, from writing memoir, from writing nonfiction. Doing this kind of work also makes you see exactly what your story really is, or your argument really is. And that can be terrifying because, you know, maybe you don't like it. And that's hard. And it also makes you, because a synopsis is so short, it makes you confront the fact that you might have to get rid of some things that you really love. Some things that you really are attached to might not even appear in the synopsis at all. So it makes you look at those things. And what you really are doing is, again, that performance anxiety, that, you know, coming out from behind the veil in some ways. And that's why it's so hard. I hope that the steps that I'm going to give you later today in just a minute are going to help you get over these things. But I'm just telling you all this so that you know you're not alone. If you're afraid of this, if you find it hard, it's very common. I would say that writing a synopsis is one of the most feared things that any writer ever does. So don't be worried if you're afraid. It's really quite typical. So the most common mistakes that I see people make in writing a synopsis are that they're too long. People don't think that the 3-page single space rule applies to them, and they write these long, rambling, super complex synopses, and that completely defeats the purpose of what they are. The whole point of a synopsis, or you could think of it as a summary or an overview, is to give a really clear sense of what your book is in one gulp, in one short little gulp, so that somebody could sit down, somebody meaning an agent or an editor, can sit down and really in about 5 minutes get a very clear sense of what your book is and who it's for and why it matters and whether or not it's any good. And so being too long and complex they're going to get frustrated. They're going to move on to the next one that's more concisely presented. Short is really, really important. And I know, because I work with writers all the time on synopses, everybody thinks that their book is special, that their book is not able to be reduced. And the truth is that every book can. In the samples that are on that webpage I told you about, the jennynash.com/offers page, I've got 6 synopsis samples for you to download and check out. And one of those is a 3-page, actually I think it's less than 3-page, sample from a book that's 760 pages long. It's an epic fantasy. It's this massively big, sprawling book with 7 narrators, and that author didn't think he could do this, and sure enough he did. So if he can do this, I promise you can do this too in a 3-page space. The other mistakes I see people make is the wrong tense. Many books are written in multiple tenses depending on what you're writing. Some of them, most books in past tense. A synopsis is typically written in the present tense. I don't know why, to be perfectly honest. It's just a convention that is mostly followed. And as you'll see below, I'm presenting you with the conventions and the typical ways of doing this. And if you have good reason to not follow them, of course, you shouldn't follow them. But these are typically what we look for in a synopsis. In terms of the point of view, almost without question, you want to write in third person, no matter how your book is written. Memoir is always written in first person, of course, and it's just one of those other conventions where the overview is written, the synopsis is written in third person. In the samples, you'll see one of the nonfiction book samples for a book called The Next Happy, which is a self-help book. The author of that book chose to tell her synopsis in the first person, which was an unusual choice. She broke convention to do that. And you'll see that I think she had good reason to do it. She has a very unique and sort of sassy and interesting voice, and it made good sense for her to go ahead and do that. Then the final mistake that people make is no narrative drive. So the synopsis needs to have narrative drive just the way a story or a book does. It needs to pull the reader through. It needs to have a force that gets them from beginning to end, even this little 3-page thing. And in order to do that, in order to have narrative drive, you need to write well, you need to tell a good story, you need to make a good argument. If it's nonfiction, you need to hook your reader. So it is not just a recitation of facts. That's the big thing. You are not just reciting what the book is about. You're really trying to entice the reader and pull them into your story. So what makes, how do you do that? What makes a synopsis super awesome? These are the things that I believe you really need. So it needs to be fluid and well written. You don't want anything that pulls the reader out of your narrative. Everything is designed to pull the reader further into it, so that when they're reading these 3 pages, they're really in the book. They're really in it with you. There's nothing that pulls them out that makes them think about the author or that makes them question what's going on. You want it to be a seamless experience for the reader. You also want to write with a real sense of assurance. You want to come across as being really confident, really in charge. That is, after all, the origin of the word author, right? It's authority, and you want to present with great authority. You don't want to be defensive or apologetic or, stingy. You want to be really assured and generous in your writing. You also want to make sure that where it's appropriate, you have a sense of wit and charm and whimsy in your writing that reflects perhaps what the book itself is. You don't want to be boring. So those are obviously the key things, but the thing most especially that you have to do no matter what is think about the deep level of what your story or argument really means. The surface story is what we see on the top level. It's the what, it's the how-to, it's the plot. And most people, when they make a mistake with their synopsis, it's because they stay at this level. They're just dealing with the facts of what happened or the facts of the argument. They're just staying on that top level area, and that's not why we come to read a story. We come to read the story for the why. We want to know why. Why did somebody do something in a fiction book or in memoir? If it's nonfiction, why should I care about that? Why should I change? Why should I pay attention to what you're saying? We always want to know the why. And your synopsis, absolutely, without exception, needs to get at this why, this deeper level of what your book is really about. And if you take nothing away from today's lesson, that's what I want you to take away, is that a synopsis is not just the facts, it's the deep level why. And you need to find a way to get that in. When you look at the samples that I've got for you to study, I would actually really urge you to study all 6 of the samples, even though they're going to be outside of the genre you're writing. Because the fact of the matter is that every synopsis follows the same basic steps. They've got the same basic elements in them, no matter what the genre, no matter what the topic. And I think if you read all of the samples through, you will start to see that pattern. You'll start to see why they draw you in and how they've got that narrative drive and how they've got that deep level why. They all have it. Every genre has it. So I urge you to read all the samples to really get a feel for this and a sense of how it goes. So now I am going to take you through the steps to write your own. So step 1, the first thing you want to do is give some context. So what is, for fiction, that's going to be, what is the world of the story? Also for memoir, what is the world of the story? Where do we find ourselves? In fiction or memoir, we can find ourselves literally anywhere. We can find ourselves on Mars. We can find ourselves in, 1812 in Paris, France. We can find ourselves in memoir in any city or place in the entire world. Even if it's going to be recent history and memoir, we can find ourselves literally anywhere. So the first thing you need to do is just set the stage. Where are we? What is the world that we find ourselves in? What is happening in that world? What's the prevailing culture and reality of that world? In memoir, that might be very intimate and specific about who you are at that time of the writing, but it's the same thing. It's giving us this context. It's drawing the shape of the world. For nonfiction, it's the same thing. It's just, what's the prevailing state of the problem or issue? Where does your reader find themselves at the start of whatever you're going to teach them? Where are they? What are they looking at? Oftentimes this is described as a problem. The reader has some sort of problem they want to solve, some sort of challenge they want to overcome, something they want to learn or do, and you're going to help them get there. So you want to describe what that problem or challenge is. So that's step one, is just give us some context. On the worksheet that you hopefully have in front of you, and if you don't have, you can grab at jennynash.com/offers. That worksheet has some space for you to just sketch out your ideas while I'm chatting. And then later you can go back and fill them in and flesh them out. But, just write down the first thing that comes to you about what the context of your story is, or the world of your story. Step two is we want to know whose story is it. So in this world, there's going to be a specific character who we are going to follow, or in the case of nonfiction, there's going to be some specifics about your target reader. So you go from kind of a global vision of the world to a specific vision of it. That's what this is about. You're getting very specific now. Whose story is it? So in fiction, we want to know who is the main character, and we don't really care about anything other than what do they believe about this world and themselves in it, and what do they want. That's all we really need to know. So the fact that somebody has 5 sisters and red hair and likes chocolate cake, that doesn't matter. We only need to know here what really matters in terms of why are we paying attention to this person in this story? Why do we care? What is it about them that matters in this world? I talked before about the deep level why, and making sure that your synopsis doesn't stay on the surface. And that's really what this is about now, is diving down into exactly who this person is. Same with memoir. Who are the you of the story? What do you believe? What do you want? We're all different people at different times in our lives. And when you write memoir, you're capturing a particular time and place and a particular sense of who you are. And that's what we want to know. Again, we don't have to know where you were born. We don't have to know where you went to school. We don't have to know anything other than why are we paying attention to you in this story right now? Why are we involved with you at this moment? What about your belief and your desire are we paying attention to? In terms of nonfiction, again, the whose story is it? You really want to think in terms of your target reader. Whose story is it? Well, it's their story. It's that person who's got that specific pain. They desperately need or want something. So you want to really get here in the synopsis at the very beginning. What do they believe? What do they want? What do they think about themselves in this world? You can imagine so many answers to this, but it's amazing how often people who write nonfiction are not thinking this specifically in terms of their reader, and you really need to, at this point in the synopsis, nail down that specific sense of this person, of who are you writing this for. So that is step 2. Step 3 is you want to get in what's standing in your main character or reader's way right now. So in terms of fiction and in terms of memoir, you're going to think about things can stand in people's way that are external, right? They're plot level things. They're things that happen. So that can be anything in the physical world. That can be a meteor falling on San Diego. That can be a bus that barrels through an intersection and hits a car. That can be a bad guy with a gun. That can be global meltdown of some kind. It can be big, grand, external plot level things, or it can also be small external plot level things. It can be, you fell in love with your best friend's fiance. That would be a pretty big external problem, even though it's not a meteor falling on San Diego. It's still an external plot level thing that's standing in the way of what the person wants. The other thing to think about is the internal things that are standing in their way. Usually, without exception, A good book is going to have deep internal things standing in the main character's way. Books are so much about getting over ourselves, facing our fears, facing what we thought about the world that turns out not to be true. We so often get in our own way, and it's these internal realities that are that deep level why that people are coming to story for. That deep level why is the thing that you've got to have there, because it's what people are coming for. If I tell you just a straightforward story about dinosaurs came and stamped out the village, it's like, so what? We don't care about the external plot level things unless there's some internal thing going on. Maybe the dinosaurs came and stomped off the village right when our main character was about to be crowned queen. Then and she wanted to be queen because she wanted to prove something to her dad. I'm making this all up on the fly. But you can see that having a deeper level why about why we should care about the dinosaurs stomping out the village, that's the reason we're going to care about the story. So you've got to have that internal belief system that's standing in the person's way as well. And with memoir, this is what makes a memoir really sing. I am just in the midst of reading the most exquisite memoir that I think I have ever read. I often say that every time I read a really great new memoir. It's the best I've ever read. But this memoir is called H is for Hawk, and it's by Helen McDonald. H is for Hawk. And it's an extraordinary story about a woman who is desperately knocked off kilter by grief. Her father's died and she's just absolutely shattered. And that the internal reality of this story is that she's trying to find a way to go on living when her father is no longer there. And what she wants is to not feel so overwhelmed and bereft. So the external reality of that story is her dad's dead. And the internal reality is that she is shattered by that and doesn't know how to get past it. And what happens in the book is she happens to be an expert in training birds of prey. She's a falconer, and she trains this hawk. And through the training of this hawk, she faces things about herself and her relationship with her dad and her relationship with the world and her relationship as a human being with the natural world and the wildness in the hawk. She faces all of these things in order to get what she wants, which is a sense of peace. So externally, if I were to tell you, well, this is a book about a woman who trains a hawk and teaches it how to hunt and fly because her dad died, you might not ever pick up that book. You might not ever care about it. You might not have any reason to want to be in that book and turn the pages. I don't know anything about training hawks. I didn't think that I would care about it. I wasn't sure I wanted to even read about it. But it's the internal reality, that deep level why of this story that just absolutely grabs you by the throat and won't let you go, because you can see yourself in this woman's grief and in this woman's struggle. And it's so sad and heartbreaking, and it's so beautiful the way that she describes it. And it's really just an extraordinary book. And our synopses, when we write them, need to capture that. If that woman were to have just written her 3 pages about, well, my dad died and I got this hawk and I started to train it and it, ate dead pigeons and it, I had to stay up at night to sit with it. And then one day it flew and then I got better. You would not really care about that book. And if you were an agent reading that synopsis, you would not want to sign it probably. It's because that author could describe the deep level internal why of that book that it really matters. So when you're doing this stuff about what's standing in your main character's way, you really want to think about these two levels of your story, and you absolutely want to make sure that that internal level is there. Now, for nonfiction, it's exactly the same thing. As I said at the start of the broadcast, the genre that you're working in doesn't matter. All the same things are still there. So for nonfiction, you want to know what's standing in your reader's way. There's probably external things that are keeping them from doing whatever it is that they desperately want to do, that you're going to be helping them do. Their own habits, their culture, physical realities are external things standing in their way. One of the sample synopses that you can see on the download, again, those are all on the webpage, jennynash.com/offers. On the sample, it's the last one in the on the set of 6 of, and it's a nonfiction example about, it's a business book, and it's a book called Generosity at Work. And this book, Generosity at Work, is about, so the world of this story is that the rise of the technology culture has given rise to a very surprising new thing, which is that many businesses, rather than hoarding their secrets and keeping their trade secrets under wraps and under lock and key, are actually sharing them. They're actually giving them away to other people. That's the world of the story, step 1. Step 2, whose story is it? Well, this book is directed toward a target reader who desperately wants to work in a workplace that is not just about making money and getting ahead. A lot of millennials, a lot of people of all ages want to work in a company that is good, and not just good on one Saturday where they go clean the beaches, but really good to the core. So who's this book for? It's for people who want to work in a company like that. And then you get to step 3, what's standing in their way right now? Well, what's standing in their way right now of working at a company where generosity is driving everything are the habits and the culture of business. Business for many millennia has been about getting ahead and stepping on the other guy and keeping our cards close to the vest, and it has not been about a sharing economy or the habits that would lead to generosity. So those are the external things that are standing in the way of the reader getting what they want. The internal things that are standing in their way are very many and deep and really quite profound. And they have to do with how we live in the world, how we are in the world, how we interact with other people, what, that we're scared of being left behind or left out, those internal realities. And this author combines both of those truths in her synopsis and in her book. And it's incredibly moving and beautiful. So again, it doesn't matter what genre you're writing, these elements need to be included no matter what in this step 3, what's standing in the main character's way right now. So step 4 is what happens, what literally happens in this book as it unfolds. So I always urge people to keep in mind the cause and effect trajectory of their book. And by that I mean a book can't just be a collection of things that happen. It can't just be this happened and then this happened and then this happened. That's the death knell for any story, whether it's a synopsis or a whole book. It can't just be a random collection of things that happen. It's got to be this happened, and because of that, this happened. And because of that, this happened. And on and on and on. It's a cause and effect. One thing triggers the next thing. And that's what triggers the next thing. And that's how you get that narrative drive. That's how you get a reader who can't stop turning the pages, because it's causality. It's one thing causes another. It's cause and effect. It's this happened because of that. And so when you're describing the things that happen in your book, you absolutely must keep this in mind. Now, in 3 pages, you can only describe the really top level, big picture events. You do not have time to describe every subplot, every minor character, every scene. A lot of people make the mistake in fiction and memoir of thinking that they have to just go scene by scene by scene by scene and describe things. And that doesn't often result in a good synopsis. What results in a good synopsis is this cause and effect trajectory, keeping in mind this, this chain of events and picking out just the major things that we need to know how we got from the beginning to the end. So what you want to do for this really critical step is sketch out those events. I would just do it as bullet points. Can you do 3 bullet points? Can you do 5? See how few you can do it in, and by do it I mean describe the whole arc of this progression, the whole shape of the book, and step by step how you get there. If you find that you can't do it in less than 12 or 24 steps, you're going to have to kill some of those darlings and get it down to the basic elements. And for that problem, I would look at the sample that is, it's called Blood Dawn. It's the fiction sample by John Robin. And in Blood Dawn, that's the book that's 760 pages. It's got 7 narrators. It's a massive epic fantasy. And John found a way to boil that down to a 3-page synopsis with just the major things that happened. So it is absolutely doable. You have to be ruthless sometimes to do it, but that's okay. For nonfiction, it's exactly the same thing, but now it's what will you be teaching? What are all the steps? What is the shape and structure of your argument? And again, you don't want it just to be, well, I'd like you to do this, and I'd like you to do that, and I'd like you to think about this other thing. It's got to be, well, first you do this, and that leads to the other thing, and that leads to the next thing, and that leads to the change that you desperately want to make. So again, it's that cause and effect trajectory. Although in nonfiction, it's probably more easy to think of it as the logic of your argument. What's the logic of your argument? How do you get from the beginning to the end, one step at a time? And you want to do exactly the same thing. You want to take your whole story and sketch it out bullet point by bullet point, and only keep the really key elements that you need. The book that I was speaking about a few minutes ago, Generosity at Work, you'll see in that synopsis sample that the author has broken the book down into 4 main parts. So in her synopsis, she simply discusses those 4 main parts and how they connect together and how they lead the reader through. There's another nonfiction book, The Next Happy, that has a different way of presenting the same kind of information, but it's the main steps that you need to basically get over grief. I just realized I actually have 2 books on grief in these samples, but that's okay. Grief is a big emotion. So again, step 4 is the cause and effect trajectory of your whole book. And thinking like this, instead of thinking scene by scene by scene or step by step by step by step, is going to really help you make this resonate. And the big thing to remember for every single one of the steps that you include, I know I sound like a broken record, but for every one, you want to make sure that you tell us why it matters. It's not just hanging out there in space with by itself, with nothing tethering it to your book. You want these steps in the cause and effect trajectory. You want the steps of what happened, the steps of your argument. We want to know exactly why they matter to us and matter to what we're following, what we're tracking. It's not just the facts, it's the why. And the why is, why does this matter to the character? Why does this matter to us? You always have to get that in. Finally, step 5 is, what is the resolution of the story? And the mistake that writers make here is a natural one. They hold back the information that we need to know about how the story actually ends or resolves. And I can't say it strongly enough that you need to show your hand. When an agent is reading a synopsis or an editor is reading a synopsis, they want to know exactly what happens. This is not the time to be coy. This is not the time to say, well, it's going to ruin the surprise if they know what happens. Don't do that. You absolutely want to put on the page what the resolution is. So for fiction, that's going to be, how has your main character changed? Did they get what they desperately wanted at the beginning? You want to think about those external and internal things that were holding them back. Did they overcome those? And did it turn out how they thought? We want to know the answer to all those questions. In memoir, it's exactly the same things. How did that character of you change? Did you get what you wanted? Was your belief about the world strengthened, or was it changed and shattered? And same thing, you got to think external and internal. For nonfiction, it's how will the reader have changed by following the path you laid out, or the argument you made, or the thing that you were teaching them. You know, how can they be different now that they know what you have said? And again, you want to think external and internal. So those are the 5 steps. They're laid out in the workbook. You should be able to work through that and sketch them out. All of these steps are replicated in that workbook, so you can follow through. And then the last thing is not a step. It's just, you know, the truth about writing is you've got to revise. You've got to polish up your work. A few things to say about that. The 5 steps that we just discussed do not have to be in order. They don't have to follow exactly the order that I just laid out. You'll see in the samples that I labeled each one of the 6 examples so that you can follow along. And sometimes their different steps are flipped. Sometimes they're out of order. They do not have to proceed in exactly the order I present them in. You want to write your synopsis in a way that makes sense to you for your book. So these, again, are guidelines and the common way that things are done, but you want to do things the way that it makes sense for your book. The other thing to know is that some of the steps may take up more room than others. You'll see on the samples that sometimes people only spend half a paragraph on one of the steps and they spend 3 or 4 paragraphs on another. That's completely fine. And it's not always the same. It's not always that a writer spends more time on the cause and effect trajectory and explaining what happens. Sometimes they spend more time on the world or the problem. That certainly might be true for a nonfiction book. So don't worry about, it's not even Steven for these 5 steps. Some steps might go by very quickly and other steps might take a lot longer. Another thing to think about is you want to cut out any extraneous anything. So that's subplots, that's characters, that's arguments, that's words. There's no room in a synopsis for any fat whatsoever, for any, you just do not have room to do anything except the main task at hand as laid out in these steps. I shared with you as a special bonus on this webinar, progression of a synopsis that I worked with a writer on. It's for a fiction, a new adult novel, and it's called Made in Heaven. And in that progression, you'll see there's 5 drafts of the synopsis that the writer developed, and each one I'm giving feedback to her, and she's responding in the following draft. And what you'll see is that largely what she did was cut out all the extraneous things. She was getting so detailed and so mired in all these things that it was just impossible to even know what her book was about. The biggest problem that she had is that her book had 2 main characters. It was a love story, and each one had their own trajectory. And while it would be tempting to go into each main character's story and into each main character's head in the synopsis, it doesn't really serve what you're trying to do here. You're trying to give, like I said, a big gulp of your book and have somebody be able to get it in one quick read. And having a bunch of point of views and a bunch of characters and a bunch of subplots is not going to help your cause. So you'll see in that progression of editing that the author, whose name is Lizette, goes through having two main characters in her synopsis, and she actually ends up axing one completely. And then you'll see how that character informs her final version. This character's still there and still there in a really strong way, but just not, it's not her story in the synopsis. So remember, the main goal of the synopsis is to get the agent to read your book and fall in love with your book. It's a tool. A synopsis is a tool. And as the writer who wrote me today about performance anxiety and needing the courage to admit that she's a storyteller, you know, there's a reason for that kind of fear, because a synopsis really is a selling tool. That's all it is you're wanting to entice somebody to read your story. So it doesn't matter if it doesn't absolutely 100% perfectly reflect everything that's in your story. That's not the point. The point is to get in all these elements, to write it in a way that's your voice and your tone, and to entice the reader to want to read more. So to that end, that's the next step on this revision list. You want to make it engaging. You want to make it interesting and fun. You want to make it your voice that you use in the book itself. You want to make it light. If it's just this sort of gnarly, dark, fact-based recitation of, you know, external events, that's not going to hook anybody. You have to remember to again write it in your voice and put in some wit and whimsy, and always make sure we know why we should care, why it matters, what we need to pay attention to. And then finally, you want to make sure that it sounds good. So in other words, there's no incorrect grammatical things going on. There's no weird, awkward phrasing. It flows, and the absolute best way to accomplish this is to read it out loud. You'll know when you read it out loud if you stumble on something that it's not good, that something's wrong. If you stumble on it, you wrote it. So if you stumble on it, that means your reader is gonna stumble on it for sure. So you don't want to do that. So read it out loud. Make sure it's really awesome. If you have a reader friend who you trust, of course, give it to them and ask for their feedback. I always like to urge people to be very mindful and intentional about who they ask to read their work, even if it's just 3 pages long, because giving it to the wrong person at the wrong time can be very damaging. You need to be careful about who you share your work with and what you ask of them. You know, I always at this stage, if I'm turning in a synopsis to somebody, that means I'm really serious and ready to go out into the world. I ask my readers to rip apart my stuff as much as they possibly can, because I want it to be perfect. And I would rather hear that it's not perfect from my beta reader than I would from an agent who's just sending